The referee's a podcast with Jack and Kelly too. Scottish Championship pass, they give us the show. Footy tales from the pitch, controversies they scratch. Every moment they'll itch, no call left to bash.
Here we go again. It's the Referees a Podcast, Season 2, Episode 11. My name is Cameron Smith. Back with you again. We're getting fairly consistent again after our little wee break. Jack Curry, you're back with me again as always, by my side, off to this correct side here. First time, not even a hesitation. How are you this week?
Oh, Cam, I'm doing very, very well, thank you. I've been, thinking of those 4 words all week. Here we go again. I can't wait to get the podcast started this week, Cam. I'm very excited. I've got one more day of work this week, and then I'm off for the whole of next week. No work for a week. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. But listeners, don't fear. That does not mean the podcast is going to stop. I'm not going away anywhere. So we'll still have great content for you to come as well, Cam. How's the week been for yourself?
Not too bad. Just sort of usual stuff, off to work, back from work. I did actually end up taking off Monday following the Scotland game. Obviously, it wasn't anything to write home about in terms of the game itself. A shocking display overall, really. But my brother was out, his pal was out, and they managed to get the kids picked up. So the night opened up nicely. So the minute I heard that the kids were potentially getting picked up at the end of the game, I messaged one of the guys in work and I said, look, is it cool if I have tomorrow off? And they're like, yes. I was like, excellent news. So, took full advantage of that and got sufficiently drunk. Nothing to complain about in terms of that. The 3 points were obviously gained and a nice time was had by all. So I had a fairly recovery-based Monday before then just a fairly standard week of work. But yeah, no complaints. But I am very jealous of your week off. Definitely, very much so.
No, absolutely. It's going to be really, really good. But as you said there, Cameron, we will just touch on the Scotland situation for a wee minute here. It's a strange one being Scottish just now, isn't it? Because we got 6 points out of 6, which is perfect. But the performances really, really weren't there.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing. Obviously, results matter the most, right? But at what point do performances become relevant, even when you are getting results?
I think that's always relevant. I think they're trying to frame it in a way right now where it's not relevant because we've got the points and it puts us in a really good position, which is true. But it's not done anything for the mentality of the boys going into 2 very tough last games that, if we're putting our dreaming hats on, could be the games that determine if we win the group or not. For being pessimistic, it's probably more likely that it's 2 dead rubber games because we've already achieved second place. But we'll see. I think I would like them to have done a number on Belarus just to sort of get the heads up and thinking, we are a good football team and look, we've just scored 5 goals. Yes, it's against Belarus, but it's 5 good goals, But instead, that goal that was chopped off, I'm glad it was chopped off, but it was light for VAR to go back and overturn that. I thought was extremely lucky on our part. Could have gone very differently. So I don't think that game will have done them any favours or any sort of positivity really. I think they'll go away saying that's fine, we got the 6 points, but I think in the back of their head they'll go, we're done for here.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, and I think that's where we'll always be just upfront and honest on this podcast. Is we were very lucky to get 3 points against Belarus because that goal should never have been chopped off. If we're being honest, and if that happened to us, we'd have been raging. So I completely agree with what you're saying there, Cam. It's a strange time being a Scotland fan and being Scottish just now because you should be happy. You should feel really optimistic, but we all don't. because the performances have been shocking. So it's been a strange one. It's definitely been a strange one. But yeah, anyway, enough stalling because we need to get started
Yeah.
on some league action, Cam, and it's starting with a hopefully, Cam, we'll start with a negative and end with a positive for you and your team this week. But we need to start with a negative.
Yeah.
Talk me through the disappointing day up at Gayfield for the 4-1 defeat against Arbroath.
I think I said previously that the Partick Thistle game was the worst performance I've seen this year, but this took it to whole new levels. Arbroath beat us earlier on in the season. First game at home, 3-1, and I didn't think that day we played particularly badly, but there's 3 mistakes that all led to a goal. This time it was just we looked to be, maybe a plucky League 2 team or a struggling League 1 team playing in the cup against some sort of high flying championship outfit. We were just not there. Just not there. Absolutely off the pace the entire game, barely stringing 2 passes together at any point. Got fairly lucky with a goal late on with our only shot on target. I don't even know that we had a shot in the first half. Just really shocking, really shocking, and it's one of those ones that I still sometimes go and watch the manager and player reactions at the end of the game, and I don't think I remembered them being fuming enough about the result. It's always looking at the positives, and there's some things that we can take. There was nothing that they could be taken from that game, nothing. And I think what it shows is, with our, it's the few injuries that we do have dotted around the squad. I think what it highlights is that outside of our first 11, I think if you're looking at everyone's entire squad in our league, I think we maybe have the weakest overall squad. Because as soon as you lose a first team player, it's just a young guy coming in, and they're good young guys with lots of potential, but they're not there yet. So as soon as we have 1 or 2 injuries, we're in big trouble, and we're there, and we've been there for weeks.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, as someone kind of looking into the situation from the outside, Cam, it seems as though you've actually summed it up perfectly, and you've kind of spoke really eloquently there about the whole situation whilst hearing your frustration at the same time. I suppose for me, looking at this situation, there's kind of 2 questions that almost kind of morph into each other. And I think I spoke to you about this maybe on Saturday evening or Sunday, and the heat of the moment for you after the game, but when you look at the starting 11 there for Queen's Park, to me at least, it looks extremely defensive. You could almost argue whether Seb draws this or not, whether there's an out-and-out striker that started in that game as well, and you then couple that with being 3 down at half-time. What do you make of that?
So Josh Fowler is injured, as is Mikey Ruth. So for lack of having another striker, Seb Drozd is the most attacking of the remaining players that we have. So while I wouldn't usually expect him to start as a striker, he has done it occasionally from time to time last season, filling in gaps and stuff. He's not an out-and-out striker by any stretch of the imagination. He is much more sort of I want to call him a technical link-up player, but he doesn't really do that very well either. He stays on the ball a bit too long, and he usually goes the wrong way and ends up surrounded by 3 or 4 guys and stuff. Like, he is tricky and he's got technical skill, but trying to get it out of him seems to be the issue. Getting him on the ball in the right area with enough space to drive and jink, and he has it in there. It's just trying to eke it out. So no, we didn't look great going forward. That does have us shown there as on BBC at least as a 3-4-3, but I would have still said that we were playing a 4 at the back, but with either Shields or Fieldson playing as a winger, but with a traditional back 4. McDonnell on the other wing with Savoury playing in behind draws is sort of what I would have put that as rather than what's shown there. But it's very similar, really, at the end of the day.
You speak about draws there, though, right? And he's a bit of an enigma
Yeah.
for me when I look at it a Queen's Park perspective, because when he first came in, you were seeing him play every week, and you were saying there's potential in this boy. He's good, And then he has that massive moment at Ibrox, and then he just never really seemed to have done anything since then.
It's slightly different to even that. So he came in, and he didn't play for a good few weeks after he came in, and then he came on in that game that you came to at Annan. He came on late on there, as did Rhys Evans, or Jude Bellingham, as we took to calling him. And that was the first time I saw Drozd, and you could see that night he'd done like a few little tricks and skills and done in a few people. Didn't do anything in the end. Didn't score, didn't assist anyone, but you could see just that little bit. And again, he didn't really play for very much after that. And then he got a wee break here and there. But I think he only scored 2 goals last year. The first one, his first goal at Livingston, was an absolute cracker. Livingston away, 1 each. Takes the ball down, does a guy in, moves in the keeper and slots it nicely. And then obviously the Rangers goal, I can't remember him scoring any other ones. But even when it was Dom Thomas when he left in January, that's when Seb got a little bit of a run. I think he played maybe 6 games, started 6 games in a row, and he struggled. He did struggle, It was, don't know if it's lacking of confidence or, again, like I say, poor decision making. Deciding to go the wrong way or not making that pass when you had the opportunity to make the pass, and just little things like that. A little bit of greediness dashed in, which doesn't really make sense if you're a player who doesn't capitalise on it that often. So yeah, he's a strange one. I still like him. I still got a super soft spot for Seb Drozd. Even prior to and excluding the Rangers goal, I still always thought, come on, get Seb on. He's got a wee bit of magic, even though he would come on sometimes and do nothing. But then the Rangers moment just sort of solidified it, and he's done okay this year. But yeah, that wasn't his game, and we didn't really have much to talk about from the bench either.
Nah, it kind of shows you where you're at when Liam McLeish is coming on. If we're being honest, and not being too harsh on him. But we spoke about him a lot in previous seasons, so never really impressed. I don't think out in the loans either. So yeah,
and obviously you look at there. Sorry, just before we go on, in terms of being weak and not having it, you can see there, Charlie Fox had to come off at halftime for Team Am Scott. At that point, we had Ewan Murray on, who was injured for the last game and wasn't really fully fit to play, and Carlo Pignacello, who was on the bench, who then had to come on later on in the game as well for Ewan Murray, because Ewan Murray couldn't continue, and Carlo hadn't been in the team already because he had a problem with his back. So now, in order to actually just field a defence, we're having to rotate in and out players who are fighting injury as well. So yeah, we're pretty done in unless we can start getting some players back from injury. Because it's severe at the moment.
It's not great.
We must have like 8 or 9 players out with injury or something right now. And while I already mentioned we probably have the thinnest team out there, so when
you've got a tight squad, the injuries never help, do they?
Yeah, it's brutal. So fingers crossed some of them are back any time now.
Yeah, no, definitely, because it's going to be vital for Queen's Park to kind of put the end of this run of bad form, really, since he got that win away to County.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I was going to ask you just very quickly about Arbroath. How impressed, you spoke about how disappointed you were with your side, but how impressed were you by the Red Lippies? Any impressive goals in amongst the 4?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say because we honestly looked that poor. Like I mentioned, it looked like we were not in the same division as Arbroath, and they played well. Obviously, they played really solid, pretty quick football. Like they played like a team who knows how to play in the Championship. And it looked like they were playing just a bunch of wee boys that they rounded up down at the beach and said, "Do you lads want to come and play a game of football?" So that, like I say, yeah, they played, really nice stuff and played really well, but I don't know if it just looked like that because they were playing against us. But certainly not to take anything away from them. They kept the pressure on, even obviously pounding in another goal late on as well. So can't take anything away from them as they thoroughly beat us on the day, and that's that.
And of course, 2 weeks ago when I said I fully expect Arbroath to fall off a cliff now and drop down the league, they've actually moved up a place
So
to
what
third.
you're saying is it's your fault.
Yes, they've completely shut me up with a row against this
and
Football
just
Hill and a thumping at Queen's Park.
A quick pointer to something that we talked about right early on, maybe even before the season started. Rocco Hickey-Focaccia didn't get off the bench, and I've not noticed him getting off the bench too many times in recent weeks. Obviously, you had a bit of a theory that he would maybe do something this year, and I thought, there's something not right because he's a good player and is not playing any games.
I think he's a great wee player from what I've seen of him, which is pretty limited. But I've seen him maybe play 3 or 4 or 5 times. Anytime I watched him, I thought he was a great young player. So there has to be
he's got something about him as a footballer. He's really good with the ball at his feet. He can run with it. He can keep it under control well, and he's really good at dancing down like the edge of the pitch and keeping the ball in and stuff. Really good at all that stuff. But there's something not right. For him to not play definitely. Last year when we had the problems that we did, and then to move to Arbroath where you think, okay, maybe that's a good chance for him to get an opportunity. And I think he did play early on. I think he did score maybe in his debut, potentially. And he's not getting the chance that we were maybe thinking.
No, maybe he needs a wee loan move or something to just get some minutes in. But you think I would have taken him at Firhill in the summer, as an option, and not necessarily he would start because for us Chalmers and Fitzpatrick have been doing so well, but you would have expected him to get good minutes at a team like Arbroath. So it's definitely an interesting one, Cam. I think that's a great point, and we'll keep a wee eye on that as the weeks progress. But moving on, from Arbroath down to Greenock, it was my side, Cam, in action, and what was a dramatic end to the game with Alex Samuel, firing past the Morton goalkeeper in the 93rd minute. But you must say, even though Tommy Adlai obviously had to score against Thistle, when you see the stats, Cam, 26 shots Thistle had in that game. I know we hit the bar, mate. we hit the post. I think it was one of those. Morton were doing the classic Morton, get a fairly early goal. And it was that the sit-in, time waste, Billy, exactly, all of that kind of stuff. And Thistle just couldn't break them down. And I think Mark Wilson said it just wasn't going to be your day. But my dad has said this to me. There's just something about this Thistle team this year, and there's a real togetherness, and there's obviously good ability. We've got good players in the right positions. And Samuel's been one of those. He's came off the bench quite a bit recently and changed the game, and really looked like a positive influence, So I think you need to say fair play to Wilson because he continuously gets his team, right quite a lot, which is a difficult thing for managers. And we are very vocally critical of managers a lot on this podcast. So I think you do need to give praise where praise is due. But on the flip side of that, for as much as I think, even though Thistle equalised in the last minute, they still probably felt as though they should have won the game. And I still think, and another caveat to that would be Morton probably feel as though they should have won the game, considering it was the 93rd minute that they conceded in.
It's a tough one for them, that's for sure.
Very tough one for them, but they are the draw specialists.
That's it.
So, it's 8 draws from 10 games. It's truly amazing.
That is amazing.
It is absolutely crazy. And they sit in 6. It's
as
just where Morton are meant to be, as expected. So when it comes to Morton, I almost find it difficult to say anything because I'll almost just, as we say, this is what we predicted from Morton. This is what we expect. Maybe not quite as many draws, right enough. But that is what you'd expect.
Yes and no. Like, was it? I think I'm sure they drew just as many games at this at the start of this amount of games last year, if I'm honest, but maybe not.
Well, I remember they ended on 12 wins, 12 draws, and 12 losses last season. But I do remember that they were like
24 goals scored, 12 goals conceded,
yeah,
12 goal difference. Yeah,
all that stuff.
but no, they're certainly living up to their reputation so far this year, anyway. And yeah, I think you're probably spot on what you're saying. You know, you look at the stats and you say, well, that's a game that Thistle should have been winning, and the fans will be, you know, maybe a little miffed that they've seen so many shots and not taking the win. But then on the flip side, like you say, Martin have done the business right up until the 93rd minute, keeping it tight, keeping you out, doing their best to stop it. 9 goalkeeper saves to then be let down. And just on your point on Alex Samuels, I remember when he came on against us, and obviously the game had already been done by then essentially, but you know, he's a right energy up there, and you know, he's always running, he's quick, and it's that way where you see him bearing down, you're like, I don't like that. He certainly has that sort of presence about him.
Presence is the exact word I was thinking there, Cam. He has that, you know, he's got the stature, he's got the speed, you know, and he's got, you know, a decent strike in him as well. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think he'll be chomping at the bits to get some more starts.
Yeah, for
certainly,
sure.
But you can see why Wilson likes to use him as a sub. You know, I think it was one of those, when we spoke last week, Cam, in the podcast, I did say it was going to be a really difficult, you know, afternoon, as we know it is, down in Greenock, and, you know, coming away with the draws, you know, probably the most a lot of teams will expect to get there this season. So I think from a Thistle perspective, you need to kind of keep the positives of the unbeaten run going. You know, it was clearly a much better performance than the one against Arbroath the week before.
Yeah.
And we still sit exactly where we are, you know, 6 points behind St Johnstone, but we have a game in hand, and that game in hand, Cam, is going to be coming up on Tuesday night. So against what is it, a very informed Ayr United side now, who we'll get on to speak to soon. So yeah, from a Thistle perspective, very, very happy, Cam. You know, if you asked me this before a ball was kicked at the start of the season and said you'd be sitting second, I'd be delighted.
I bet.
So it's been really, really good. And you know, so and just something, and I know you know because I was chatting to you about it last night, but I'm going to very segue and talk about this for 30 seconds in the podcast, Cam. Listeners, I was at Gretna 2008 last night, which was bringing me back a lot of memories of being down there as a youngster supporting Thistle away from home and seeing us getting drubbed. And I knew you, Cam, had some memories watching football down at Raydale Park as well.
Yeah, Kenny Duker doing the business against you. What a fucking plonker. I hated that. But yeah, no, a wee bit of history in terms of Gretna's historic rise and fall. But yeah, no, it's strange obviously to see them, you know, having to reform and do their business down and wherever they're playing at now in terms of league places, you know.
So they are Lowland League. They are now. So just one outside of the pyramid.
And with that splitting next year, would they be East or West?
I presume West.
Probably West would make sense, I would think, wouldn't it?
West would make sense, I think. So yeah. So we'll wait and see. That's interesting. I forgot about that Lowland League change for next season. So, but it's interesting you say the Dr. Duker, because he's obviously the one that you always think about. You know, there's Colin McMenamin and James Grady, but it's always Duker. Is always the one that you always think about. So anybody listening, anybody watching, if you want to share any stories, any memories about watching Gretna at Raydale Park or at your home ground, send us in a wee message, or any other team that's no longer with us you want to talk about, then please do let us know, and we'll segue and talk about it in next week's episode. But I just wanted to bring that up there, Cam, as a wee bit of something different. But moving back to why we're all here, Wraith Rovers, Cam, they've fallen from 3rd to 5th in the last couple of weeks. It's not looking great just now for Barry Robson's side. A 2-0 home defeat against Ayr United, and what looked like a pretty comfortable afternoon for United as well.
Yeah, you've got to say so, don't you? I mean, we've obviously been talking up Wraith Rovers for, you know, generally me a long time, you much more so recently. And it seems to be as soon as you jumped on their bandwagon and finally agreed that they're a good team, that they've all of a sudden become not a good team. I'm starting to wonder what sort of black magic you've been doing down there in England, destroying good Scottish teams that have good squads.
Well, it's interesting. I said our both were going to fall off a cliff, and they've risen.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I praised Wraith, that they've fallen off a cliff. So clearly, just don't know what I'm talking about at all, and I don't know why you're all wasting your time here, listeners.
The curse of the podcast, or more specifically, just you, Jack Curry.
The curse of Curry.
The Curry curse.
Curry curse. But I did ask you the question last week, Cam. I posed the question to the listeners: who's got a better team on paper, Ayr United or Wraith? And we both agreed that it was Ayr United.
We did.
But we both fancied Wraith to win that game. So it was definitely always going to be close. I think the thing that shocked me is the fact that when you look at the stats, when you look at the fact that Wraith haven't scored a goal at home, it just seemed as though Ayr United stole that. Strolled that. That's true.
That's true. They've not scored a goal at home.
We're not in this game.
Oh, I thought you meant in general. I was like, that can't be true.
No,
and then when I
just
think about it, they scored in the opening game there against us.
Yeah,
so
and they beat our both at home.
I was like,
last
what?
week,
That can't be true.
Yeah,
sorry,
no,
they've not scored in this
they haven't scored the whole.
game.
Yeah, they haven't scored in this game.
It's like, well, fuck.
No. But it just seems like when you had such a big game like that, it's back-to-back defeats, and Ayr United are now ahead of them with their game in hand against us. So it's one where Wraith Rovers need to stop the bleeding, and they need to stop it quick.
They do. No, they certainly do. Like you mentioned, right at the top there, dropping from 3rd to 5th. Now, obviously, with the points the way they are and how early it is in the season, obviously that can happen very quickly. Sometimes a point is enough to raise or drop you 2 or 3 places. So I don't think they'll be worrying too much about the actual position and stuff. But it's that drop in form, 2 losses in a row after what's. Although on good form in general, it had been a bit shaky before that. Before that, that win, there was a draw and a loss, so not super consistent. But they'll certainly be hoping that the losses don't start becoming consistent and further dropping down the table. But no, I don't think we have too much to worry about from Wraith Rovers. Ayr United, obviously, kicking it up a notch. They're now unbeaten in 6. 6 at least. Well, it must be 6, yeah, because they would have lost their other 3. So yeah, unbeaten in the last 6, and sitting pretty in 4th place, chasing down Arbroath, who are still in 3rd place with 1 point more, but a -4 goal difference. Mental.
Mm-hmm. It is mental with Arbroath. Going back to them, conceded the most amount of goals in the entire league and sitting 3rd, as you said, with the -4 goal difference, because they've not been poor in front of goals by any stretch of the imagination. Mm-hmm. So it does just show you that, Arbroath's defence can be found out against, the right or wrong team, depending on whether you're a Arbroath fan or not. So as you said, Ayr United have definitely turned it around. It's almost as if something's just clicked with everything, with Scott Brown and his side down there at Somerset. When you look at the team that started there for me, Cam, it feels as though from the outside looking in, he is actually finally starting to find out what his best team is for him. And I think what you've seen against Wraith Rovers is it. And I think we're going to notice this not really having an obvious striker on the pitch from here, because they've actually, ever since they've done that, their form's dramatically got better. When we've not seen Oakley, when we've not seen Dowds, when we've not seen Main starting, they've actually been winning games. And that's really, really strange. But it's working for them, and we challenge that to Brown. Find the team that works, find the system that works, and he's doing it.
It's a strange one, but it is also going to cause them problems when they have 3 strikers who all want to start games and none of them are starting games. You've got all these really good strikers all sitting on the bench. This. They'll have a problem there. He can't do this all season long. Even if this is what he decides to be his best, he can't do that because his players that he has available to him are not going to let him do that.
But if it's what's working, Cam, you can't see him changing it. If going on this run, 6 games unbeaten, 3 or 4 wins in there, and a player comes to and say, I want to start, well, he's going to say, well, this is the reason why you're not.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one, because I do agree with you. You would think on paper he would have problems, but as we've seen before, if Scott Brown believes something, that's what he's going to do.
No, I get that, but it's not like Ayr United are this sort of team with this massive pool and ability to keep players around who aren't playing. I think he's got to think about the team as well. The results have got to come, but he's got to find a way of being able to win games when he's using some of these expensive players that he's bought. I just imagine the wage budget at Ayr must be through the roof.
It must be. They must be up there. I reckon County are way above everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think St Johnstone will be second.
Yeah.
But Ayr United must be quite clearly the third highest spending team.
Like, if you think about Ayr's wage budget this year in comparison to basically all the championship teams from last year, I think you've got to imagine they'd be higher.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Like, if this team was the team Ayr had last year, I think they probably would have done some pretty severe things.
And we will exclude, like, they won't be paying all of Leon King's 15 grand a week wages, obviously.
Of course.
Not. But we'll exclude that because they'll only be paying a percentage, but even still, it's a lot.
Did Rangers keep him?
I'm sure he's still on loan.
Oh, God.
Let me double check. I'm gonna have a quick Google, but I'm sure.
I suppose maybe they weren't able to get rid of him. No one could pay those wages.
Yeah, on loan. So
he was
that'll be
dire
interesting.
last year. He was dire.
He was really strange, Cam, because when you got him on loan, I thought, oh my God, that's.
Yeah.
But from what I've heard from Rangers fans, he's got the best centre back in the Championship here, and he was rotten.
He was unbelievably bad.
And this is a man who played. He's got significant, 4 or 5, 6 games in the Champions League.
Yeah.
So it was very, very strange. But obviously, he seems to have. It seems to be working just now at Ayr.
He was partnered beside that plonker that we had on loan from Brighton or something like that. He was on loan at Livy in the first half of the season, played like 30 minutes.
Oh yeah, didn't get a game.
Returned in January, and then we took him.
Because he wasn't.
I can't remember his name. He was that atrocious. But having the two of them being the partnership at the back was that was something else.
Didn't really work for you.
That was something else.
But yeah, but anyway, but all props to Ayr United. You know, they're flying just now, and they're only looking one way, and that's certainly upwards. So yeah, absolutely fair play to them. I suppose one quick question, Cam, before we move on to our final game this week. Wraith Rovers, was give them a lot of praise, but I think it's time to do the opposite just now. If Dylan Easton isn't firing all cylinders, have they got enough?
Yeah, probably just about. In most circumstances. It is always the big issue with teams like that. It was Queen's Park with Dom Thomas before he left, and Wraith Rovers with Dylan Easton. It's so beneficial to have that one superstar player in our division, because he's the type of player that can dig you out of a hole in his own. But the flip side of that is when that star player is not performing and not doing the business and doing the things that you really need them to do, then the team as a whole struggles. And it's a classic trade-off, isn't it? It's like, do you want to have a team full of just solid good players who can all play together really nicely, but none of them have any sort of special attribute, that like a game-changing attribute? Or would you rather have that one player who has that sort of extra special ability, but when you don't have him, you struggle? It's a tough one. I think generally speaking, it is probably better to not have that star player, but the little moments of magic you get from having a player like Dom Thomas was at Queen's Park, and like Dylan Easton is for Wraith Rovers, it certainly makes it more entertaining.
Yeah, No, definitely do agree with you on that. It gives you the extra moments, but it's an interesting question you posed there, Cam. You know, whether you do want the balance or you want the star individual. So certainly one for everybody out there to have a think about and do let us know yourself what way you would go on that one. But Cam, final game to talk about this week are our two new sides relegated from the
Yep.
Premier League facing off against each other. And let's just be honest, it doesn't look like it was a classic at all
No.
here. The one thing that stands out for me, though, 0-0, obviously everybody from St Johnstone and Ross County, have you seen the corner stats?
Yeah.
17
17-0.
corners to
Yeah.
nil in the corners. That's wild.
Never seen anything like that.
17 to
Yeah,
nil.
it's crazy.
So how do you get 17 corners in a game?
I don't know. Especially with only, I know shots isn't a guarantee of a corner, but 12 shots, 6 on target. So let's say, all 6 of those shots were saved and put out for a corner. We're still missing 11. Yeah,
It's
it's a
absolutely
crazy
wild.
stat. It's a crazy stat. I wonder if anyone had something crazy like that on their bet builder.
Yeah, like over 15 corners
Over
or
15
something.
corners. But
No, that's absolutely crazy.
yeah, you look at the stats there and you know that Ross County are walking away from that going, thank God.
Yes, Ross County were under siege at points in that game, where they were crammed in for 5-10 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Based looking at some of those stats, St Johnstone 62% possession in there as well. And, I don't really think we can criticise either of the teams here though, because I
No.
think for St Johnstone 10 games in, they're still unbeaten. They faced on paper one of the best sides in the league and got a clean sheet, got a point. And the flip side for that, Ross County, with the start that they've had, a draw away to the runaway league leaders at this stage is not a bad thing at all. So I think it's one of those ones where it doesn't look great on paper, but I don't think it's a terrible result for either team.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think maybe St Johnstone will be frustrated based on the stats, and presumably, obviously, we've not seen the game. We weren't there. We didn't watch it. But you've got to imagine that St Johnstone played the better football. We can see that they had more of the ball. They had more shots. But you've got to imagine that the opportunities that they were creating must have been better as well. They must have been playing better football, playing better as a team, much better looking, presumably. So I think they'll probably be looking at that and thinking, we should have won that. They could probably pinpoint to 3 or 4 points in the game where they could have won. So I think it'll be much more frustrating for them, but I think they'll be happy enough to take like you say, a point against, on paper, probably the best team in the division. Just obviously not with the form to back it up. But yeah, no, I think both will be happy enough. Certainly happy enough to just move on and start thinking about the next game and not have to worry too much about what actually took place at the game. They can say, right, okay, some of it was nice, some of it was less so nice, but here's what we're doing this week. Definitely.
And I think you're spotting the money there, Cam. I'm talking about St Johnstone being the more disappointed of the two, because I think when you look at the fact that they only made one sub during the entire game as well, and that came in the 85th minute, the manager obviously must have thought that the players were playing well and that goal was coming, and it obviously just didn't quite in the end. So I think it's one where we both like Simo Valakari as a manager here, and he's doing some really, really, really good stuff at St Johnstone this season. So I think even though despite back-to-back draws at the top of the league, he'll still be absolutely delighted with the entire start that side had this season. And when they now kind of look, they've got a tricky game away to Arbroath this weekend, so it'll be interesting to see, how that one goes. But we'll go on to that in a wee bit there, Cam. What do you make of that? Have you got any more talking points for that? Or will we move on to
Not really. It's tough when it's a 0-0 game, isn't it? I think we've probably squeezed as much life out of that one as we can, so I don't see any harm with moving on to the fixtures coming up this weekend, of which we do have a return to the Friday night fixture, don't we? Dunfermline against Wraith Rovers.
The Fife derby is always a good one, isn't it? I think you always feel the passion whenever you watch a Fife derby, and
Yeah.
it always gets the locals out and it gets a good crowd in, whether that's at East End Park or at Starks. It's two right out of form sides, though. Both Dunfermline and Wraith Rovers have been pretty hulking of late. So it's going to be, I think, a bit of a battle cam on the day for me. I can't imagine it's going to be very pretty, but I think there's going to be a lot of passion. There's going to be a lot of fight. There's going to be a lot of good tackles going in there, and I'm just delighted that we've got some television coverage and Friday night action back this week.
Yeah, gritty, fight on our hands in the darkness.
Yeah.
Presumably a pretty decent Friday night crowd, I would have thought.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, not happy that it's a return to the Friday night fixture, and happy to have what you'd probably class as a pretty classic championship fixture. Dunfermline against Wraith Rovers, like you say, it's going to be, there's going to be knocking each other about and doing the business on the pitch. So yeah, I'm looking forward to tuning into that. I was going to say on Friday, but it's tomorrow. We're recording on a Thursday, so tomorrow evening after work, home,
flash
few beers.
Today, if you're listening to it, if we record on the Friday.
That's true. Yes, the game will be starting in 2 hours and 45 minutes if you're listening to this at podcast release.
Yes, exactly. If you've got notifications and are subscribed and all that jazz. But I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Cam, because Fife Derby, it's going to be pitch black. We're getting to this time of the year, and it's getting cold as well. When you mix all of these things together, when the tackles go flying in,
maybe a bit of rain
that we love. A rain, bit of slipping and sliding. So it's going to certainly be interesting. It's going to be a fantastic watch on Friday night. I'm actually really looking forward to it. And a game I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago there, Cam, but it's our first ever Saturday 3 o'clocks, and we've actually got some Tuesday games to talk about as well.
Yeah.
But it's Arbroath sitting in third, hosting top of the league St Johnstone. Is this where St Johnstone's unbeaten start comes to an end, or are Arbroath going to have a bit of a slip up here?
I still don't see it. I think St Johnstone are they're obviously, I don't want to say struggling. They're not struggling, but obviously they've not won the last 2 games. Not managed to have that killer instinct that they showed so early on, that ability to just go and eke out that victory and get the goals. They've been struggling, and obviously Arbroath lesser so in terms of the putting the ball in the back of the net in recent games. So you never know. You certainly can't rule it out, especially after my experience in Arbroath very recently. But no, I still don't. St Johnstone have that air of Falkirk from last year at the moment, where until they lose, you still just can't imagine them losing. So that's sort of where I'm at the moment. They could very well lose this weekend, but at the moment, I still just don't believe it.
Yeah, I do get you. It's one of those ones for me. You do need to say St Johnstone are going to be favourites going into that one, despite Arbroath's impressive form recently. But as we spoke about the conditions on Friday night, you never know what it's going to be like up there in Arbroath.
That's true.
It could be anybody's game on the day. So we'll wait and see how that one goes. Maybe one here, Cam, that looks a wee bit more straightforward given Ayr United's form. They're at home against the draw specialist Morton. Do you fancy Ayr at home, or is it going to be a draw?
I think I do fancy Ayr here. Again, if we're making the assumption that Scott Brown's worked it out again, or at least for the time being has worked it out, then I think they'll be looking to strike where the iron's hot, strike early, so that Martin can't just then sit in and have to go for the game. I think if Martin can, hold off as long as possible without conceding, and maybe gain confidence as the game goes on, then they maybe have that chance to sort of snatch it or just hold out. But I think Ayr have just enough about them that they're maybe going to be able to put the pressure on early, get ahead, and then just not look back and not let Martin get back into it. But we'll certainly see. Martin's obviously always a tough game, and they know how to bruise you and knock you about a wee bit. So we'll see if air are up to it for the game on Saturday, but I think they've probably got enough about them.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would go fully along the lines of what you've said there, Cam. And takes you on to the two trips to Firhill for myself this week, which I'm very much looking forward to. We take on Ross County. I was up there in Dingwall earlier on this season for when we came away with the impressive victory in the league. So, fingers crossed, Cam, we can get back to winning ways.
Yep.
After two draws, and we're kind of in this position still where, going into Tuesday's game against Ayr, if, St Johnstone do slip up here against Arbroath and we can win, then it makes that game in hand against Ayr even bigger, to try and see if we can mount a fight against St Johnstone. So I think for me, it's going to be a tough game against Ross County,
Yep.
but if we can play the way we've been playing, we can certainly go into it hoping to come away with 3 points.
Yeah, definitely, and I think Ross County will face a similar sort of struggle as they did against St Johnstone. They're, tough place to go to a good team as well. So I can't imagine the County boys will be looking too favourably on it. But at the same time, the players and the team that they've got available to them, you still do have to imagine that at some point in the near future, they're going to turn a corner and they're going to all of a sudden start playing some football and beating some teams and actually looking like a team who's got the potential to be promoted. So obviously for yourself, I'm sure you've got your fingers crossed that game is not this weekend, but I still just, where I was looking at the St Johnstone Arbroath game and thinking, as you say, I didn't believe that St Johnstone had the ability to lose yet. I think I kind of believe that Ross County have the ability to win, in that sort of weird same, just feeling in the back of my mind sort of thing. But you'll have to keep me informed on that and let me know how that game is on Saturday.
Yeah, and Cam, it's certainly an interesting one, and I'm not going to argue against your thinking there. When you've got Ross County, you speak about have they turned the corner? They got that win home against Wraith. They got the draw against St Johnstone away from home. I think this is now the answer to that question. If they come down to Firhill and get a win, then we can, I think, quite safely say yes, they've turned the corner. But if they come to Firhill and we beat them, then I think
back to square one.
The question goes back to they're back where they started again.
Yeah.
Especially if yourselves pick up a result and they're back in ninth. So if Sputs maybe's in there, it'll all be answered for us come 5 o'clock. And I've just mentioned yourself there. You're the final game of the weekend to talk about. Home against the bottom of the league, Airdrie. Are you nervous going into this game? Are you excited?
No.
What's the thought?
Yes and no. I am nervous. I'm not excited. Provided we go into the weekend with the same players and squad available to us, then we will lose, I would think. If we have, Charlie Fox and June Murray both back and both not recovering from an injury, if we have Carlo Pignacello not suffering from a knock of sorts, who are we missing? We're missing Roddy McGregor, who's actually been quite good so far this year. If we have Josh Fowler back, if we don't have all or most of those players back in that sort of capacity, we're going to really, really, really struggle. And I don't really see us taking even a point if that's the case. But I'll maybe wait and see what the manager's pre-game interviews like tomorrow and see what he says. Sometimes he gives a little bit of a this guy was back in training this week, so we hope to have him, blah blah blah. I really hope we see that interview and he says, yep, the whole defence is back. Ujur, who we've not seen for 8 months, is also back, and we've also signed loads of free playing. But no, it's not a fun time at the moment to be a Queen's Park fan. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, it's not easy. Looking at it from the outside in. I've been struggling away, but yous are still in there, Cam. Yous aren't bottom. Yous do have this cushion over Airdrie, and yous are still looking up
It's not a
rather than
cushion,
down
is
at
it?
this moment. So,
Oh, it's a cushion.
I just mean
It's a
yous have
cushion, aye.
wee point of gap.
Yeah.
They can beat yous, and you're still
Yeah.
ahead of them.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting one, Cam. And then that takes us on to our Tuesday games, and we keep talking about Airdrie here because they're going to host Dunfermline. Do you think Dunfermline playing on the Friday night compared to Airdrie playing on the Tuesday is going to have any effect in that game?
Nah, probably not, realistically. I know obviously it will, that extra day recovery and preparation and stuff. I'm sure it'll have something, but I think it'll be sort of a negligible change. I'm sure both managers going into the game at the weekend will obviously have an eye on the Tuesday game as well, and picking his team accordingly, knowing that some are going to play on Friday and some are going to play Tuesday and work out the rest. I think obviously the biggest thing is if anyone receives injuries on the weekend game, that could obviously throw a real spanner into the works for the Tuesday. So I think there'll be half a focus on rotation and half a focus on just keeping an eye on that next game. So it's a good opportunity probably for some of the players who are maybe not getting quite so many minutes to get a wee go. I know obviously Neil Lennon had already been complaining about the fact that they postponed their game and it was rescheduled to this date here. He didn't feel like it gave him enough time, and he felt like his schedule was already particularly packed at that point. So maybe if we're looking at it from that point of view, maybe Dunfermline will be struggling a bit more because they've got that little bit of extra. They had to postpone a few games now from international guys off an international, and then obviously these guys are going away on international and coming back. So I think probably out of the two teams, maybe Dunfermline are going to be the slightly more tired and fatigued out of the two. So maybe that gives Airdrie an advantage, especially being the home team on Tuesday night there. So yeah, I don't think it's going to matter too much about Friday, Saturday, but I think Dunfermline are probably going to struggle that a little bit more.
No, definitely, it's an interesting one, and it's going to be a pretty big game, I think, down there with both sides kind of looking to pick up points.
Yep.
So definitely an interesting one on Tuesday, and then up at the other end of the table, Cam, Thistle hosting Ayr United. We've spoke about both of these sides, in length so far. Both being in good form.
Mm-hmm.
Coming into this one, obviously there's the weekend games to come before this, but it certainly looks like it's going to be a mouth-watering game at Firhill under the lights on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think so. I think that one I'd say has more flex and promise of being a bit more of an event and a bit more of a game on your hands. I think the Ross County one could potentially be a dull or, like I say, potentially for you painful affair. But I can't help but think the Tuesday night might be a bit more routine on your side of things, but at the same time be a more exciting and entertaining game. I think it's maybe just owing to the types of players that both yourselves and Ayr have. Quite high profile and quite good football, generally speaking, as long as you're not throwing yourselves to the ground and that sort of stuff. But I think that Tuesday night game should be a good one. You're obviously off. Are you going to that also, being the Tuesday?
I will be. I'm absolutely buzzing for it, Cam, because
Nice.
It's just by chance that my week off and they moved the game this week, so it's just perfect the way it's actually worked out. So, and I'm absolutely buzzing for it. There's very strands, to this. As you look at Ayr United's team, 3 ex-Thistle players come straight to mind, and Anton Dowds, Stuart Bannigan, and obviously David Mitchell.
Yeah.
And there's ex-Ayr United players like Logan Chalmers in that Thistle team. So there's plenty of storylines to be had. I can see things getting feisty on Tuesday, if I'm being honest, Cam. I think it's going to be a really interesting game in Tuesday night at Firhill. So we'll wait and see how that one goes. But that's enough previewing for now. There's no analysing fixtures yet, listeners. You're going to have a bit of a treat.
Yeah, there's no recap is what Jack's getting on to there in our predictions this weekend. So we don't have any full weeks to review. We're waiting on 2 games, and that's the 2 games that we've just talked about there on Tuesday. So once we have the Thistle Ayr game and the Airdrie Dunfermline game, we'll review game week 7 and game week 10, which are sitting there waiting to be reviewed. We done this just as a reminder, everyone, so that I didn't have to have points sitting in a bank for a week that we've reviewed ages ago, and they're sitting there and this, that. I've got these points waiting, you've got those points waiting. We're just reviewing it once it's complete. So we're not looking at any of the previous week's fixtures at the moment. We're just going to barrel straight on to making our predictions for this week. It is me to start this week. So,
Kick it away, Cam, whenever you're ready.
what I probably should have done first was get my... I'll just type it on my thing. Sorry, everyone, if you hear the clickety-clacking of my keyboard. It is mechanical. It is loud.
And I was going to say, this isn't going to present us with any issues of you pausing the thing this time, is it?
You know what? It might. That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
Because listeners probably actually don't have a clue what we're talking about.
Well, they do. No,
they do. Sorry, they do.
Because we had to splice it, yeah. Right, okay, sorry, bear with, everyone, bear with.
This is what you all came for here, listeners, the high production value of the Referees a Podcast, and why I'm actually just stalling here, so that we can segue beautifully into the next section whenever you're ready, Cam.
I mean, this, if nothing else, sort of proves the point that we don't, fanny anything up in terms of this podcast, it's just a case of, finish, hit the stop recording button, and that's that. But I'm ready to go now on making my predictions, and I'm going to start off in the Dunfermline Wraith Rovers game. Dunfermline 1, Wraith Rovers 3.
Oh, 3-1 Wraith Rovers. You're expecting them to come back with a bang.
Yeah.
Well, I was sweating there for a second because I don't care if you're going to say what I'm going to go for. I'm just going to go with what I think. And I thought you were going to go for what I was going to say. I'm going to go for Dunfermline 1, Wraith Rovers 1.
A wee draw there, 1-1, no problemo. Arbroath St Johnstone. I'm going to continue with my gut feeling on that one, and I'm going to go for Arbroath 1, St Johnstone 2.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that St Johnstone are going to come away with all 3 points.
Yeah.
I'm going to go 2-0 St Johnstone.
0-2, marked up there. Ayr against Martin. I'm going to say 2-0 Ayr.
Yeah, I'm also thinking very similarly, Cam. I'm going to go for an Ayr United win by a 2-goal margin. I'm going to say 3-1.
3-1, no problem. That's you marked down for that. Partick Thistle against Ross County. I think it's a toughie. I think 2-1 Thistle.
Oh, I was waiting for you going for a Ross County win.
No,
they are based on what you were saying earlier, and you could see a Ross County win. I was waiting on that coming. I'm also going to say 2-1 Thistle.
I've started to learn my lesson by this point that you shouldn't put your money against Thistle at home. So I was initially thinking of a county draw, but I thought, I can't put one each because then Thistle will just score a goal in the 93rd minute and it'll be 2-1 and they'll be upset. So Queen's Park against Airdrie, 0-0.
No.
That's
for
the
me,
best
Cam,
I can possibly guess or give.
Well, that's making my... Right, so I was going to say, for me, this is the toughest game to predict. I'm finding it really hard to back Airdrie, having not won after 9 games, and you're certainly making it hard for me to back Queen's Park. But I am, for whatever reason, I'm going to say 2-1 to Queen's.
Very nice. Hopefully Josh Fowler's back and he can grant you the wish of scoring goals. So we'll go with game week 10 fixture first, just because it's the closest one here. Airdrie against Dunfermline. Technically, this is an even week, so it's actually you to go first for this one.
Okay, so
Airdrie against Dunfermline.
And I'm going to go everything I just said about Airdrie and I'm going to go, this is going to be the night that Airdrie are going to get their win.
Okay.
I'm going to go for a 1-0 Airdrie victory. I stopped myself from saying something else there. I'm not going to say it, but I'm going to go 1-0 Airdrie.
You know what? You might not be too far from the truth there, but I'll change it just very slightly. 2-1 Airdrie. I think you're right. I'm liking Airdrie at home in that one against a Dunfermline, who by my count just got a wee bit of a pummeling. So yeah, I'm happy with that. Then game week 7. So this was me. So I will do the first one on this one. So Thistle against Ayr. It's a tough one.
Very tough.
And I think I'm about to go against the thing that I literally just said. I think I'm going to go 2-2 in this one.
2-2, excellent. Well, it's funny you say that, and I've went for quite a few large scorelines so far this season, and got nowhere near.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a large scoreline in this, and I was going to say 3-2.
3-2. Okay, that's pretty solid. Yeah, that's an exciting one. Right. Oh, fucking, what did I do there? Right, recap time then. So, for game week 11, the weekend fixtures, I have Wraith Rovers to beat Dunfermline 3-1. You have a 1-0 draw. I've taken St Johnstone to beat Arbroath 2-1. You've taken them for 2-0. Ayr against Morton. Again, we're both thinking Ayr getting that win. I've went 2-0. You've went 3-1. We've both went for the same result. Thistle against County, 2-1 Partick Thistle. And I've went for a 0-0 draw, QP against Airdrie, and you've went for a 2-1 Queen's Park victory for whatever reason. Tuesday, we've got Airdrie against Dunfermline. I've went 2-1 Airdrie, you've went 1-0 Airdrie. And Thistle against Ayr on Tuesday, I've went for a 2-0 draw, you've went for 3-2 Partick Thistle.
Yeah, absolutely, Cameron. That's us done and dusted for another week. How do you feel? How do you feel it went?
How do I feel? I find it, yeah. It's that's another podcast done, another week sorted. At least 3 or 4 happy listeners. So what more could I ask for?
Exactly. And listeners, as we always say this, but we appreciate each and every one of you. So if you are enjoying the podcast, give us a wee thumbs up, let us know, give it a wee share. Just keep encouraging us to come back and make these. But we will be back, Cam, and we're going to need to work something up special for next week with me being off. So listeners,
different format next week for whatever the form ends up being. We threw a few ideas around, but it's not going to look like this exactly. But we'll see what we end up actually concocting. But who knows? We'll see.
Exactly. And listeners, remember, if you want an extra chance of your team to win, that like button. 50% in my eyes, Cam said, what was it, 90% chance of your team winning if you hit the like button?
It's 60% of the time, it works every time.
There you go, listeners. You don't need any more enthusiasm or motivation than that. But we will be back next week. So I hope you enjoy whatever game you go to, whether it is Friday night, Saturday or Tuesday. And we will be back next week for another episode. Have a good one, listeners, and we'll see you then.
See you all later.